I'm Randy Credico. This is Randy Credico Live on the Fly on the Progressive Radio Network. And we're going to get right to our show. Afshin Rattansi is the host of my favorite TV show, and that's called Going Underground. It's on RT. It's on Monday, Wednesdays, and Saturdays, and it's the most informative news program that's around today. And not just me saying that, George Galloway, who I respect a lot, and many others. But before we get to Mr. Rattansi, I would like to say that the show in New York City, the stand-ups for Assange on the 24th, is totally sold out. So please don't bother. It will be on live stream. So follow me on Twitter and you'll find out how you can access that. That's Credico Randy at Twitter. And the one in DC, we still have some tickets left. Go to the Tabard Inn website. That's on the 16th, the Tabard Inn website, and you can actually buy a ticket online. All right, so that's it. We're going to get right into this. We're going to play a little bit of music and come back with the host of my favorite show, Going Underground, Afshin Rattansi.
Well, I won't back down. No, I won't back down. You can stand me up at the gates of hell, but I won't back down. Gonna stand my ground, won't be turned around. And I'll keep this world from dragging me down. Gonna stand my ground, and I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out. Hey, I will stand my ground, and I won't back down.
Okay, we're back. I'm Randy Credico Live on the Fly here on the Progressive Radio Network. Also, this show will be on Assange Countdown to Freedom.com and other platforms because it is being taped by video. As I said earlier, the best show on television today, anywhere. And it's not only me who says it, but George Galloway. And what George Galloway says goes a long way. And that is, of course, Going Underground, hosted by Afshin Rattansi, who I think, Afshin, you're also a producer of that show. Could you correct me one way or the other?
No, I'm just a servant of my amazing team that do everything and, work it all out. I'm just a puppet.
No, wait a second. You're in editing. You're in editing a lot. I know that you got your hands into it, right?
Not at all. I'm just a little, figurehead for it. I try and work, but it's a fantastic young team that are responsible. And my editor, Colette Valentine.
Okay. Well, I agree. I mean, the show is flawless. It's on every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, folks. As I said earlier, if you want to watch news, or even listen to it, go to Going Underground. And what's the exact link to that? Going Underground on the YouTube?
Well, if you look on YouTube, YouTube, it's underground_RT. And no doubt it's shadow banned like you are, Randy.
Do you think we are both shadow banned? There are things that I put out there that I used to get like 500 retweets on, but now it goes down to like 40 or 50. Do you actually subscribe to it, or is this a conspiracy theory, the shadow banning? Because I don't know.
There's a website. You can look it up whether you have been. So I think I was personally shadow banned for a while. Then they took it off. Funny enough, when I was talking about it. But obviously, Randy, your show has to be shadow banned. It's too dangerous. You're just too dangerous. You're America's most wanted.
You are hilarious. Afshin Rattansi, many years as a broadcaster, as a producer in news. You've been at CNN International. You were at Channel 4. I think you worked with Tariq Ali back then. What was the name of the show, and How was it
That's
working?
right. That was Bandung File back in the 80s. I was a kid. I was clearly a kid. Named Bandung after the famous Bandung Non-Aligned Conference. This was obviously before the Berlin Wall fell. Very important to be able to say there was something called the Non-Aligned Movement once. There still is, actually, but no one ever talks about a Non-Aligned Movement because obviously it's not in the interests of NATO nation media to be talking about the fact that any country could be outside the orbit of Washington and, as it was then, Moscow. But of course, the great leader Sukarno of Indonesia, the largest archipelago in the world. We don't hear about Indonesian what's happening there today, maybe because the United States and Britain killed maybe 1 million people in one of the largest communist parties in Southeast Asia when they toppled Sukarno and replaced him with their proxy Suharto.
Yeah, that is a story that if you want to see that, folks, go to the website of John Pilger, who is a regular guest on this show and your show. He did a documentary on what happened in Indonesia. It's genocide. I mean, it really was genocide, and the American public has I'm not even sure they know about Vietnam at this point because we are on our cell phones. We're not reading books. There's nothing on television unless you watch Going Underground, which is not easy to access when it's on because somehow they've not shadow banned, but they banned RT in most of these cable outlets in this country. And I don't know why. I mean, I do know why, because you are dangerous and they don't want the public to know what you're saying.
I didn't know, actually, they banned it from lots of cable networks. I thought it was available on broadcast.
Well, it is dropped in some of them. I know that in DC, I can see it. I can go to RT in DC, but not in New York unless they've changed that. But certainly you've been designated as like Russia's
Putin mouthpiece. That's all we talk about.
I mean,
I tweeted against Putin just this, in the past few days, but I guess they don't notice that. Maybe they go, you see, he tweeted against Putin just to look good, to make out that he wasn't his mouthpiece. That's how clever these Russians are. And,
right.
I've only been to Russia for a weekend. Obviously, they planted the chip in my head very quickly.
You spent more time in Venice than you did in 1 week than you have in Russia over a lifetime. But let's look at some of these other media outlets that obviously are controlled by either the government or by U.S. corporations, which are the government here, whether it be CNN, MSNBC, Fox. You could arguably say the major newspapers as well. And then Al Jazeera has been designated as a government-controlled outlet. But
the Chinese one, CGTN.
Yeah. What about?
That's banned. CGTN is banned here in Britain. They just banned the Chinese 24-hour network here to try and impress upon them what British values were as regards free speech and freedom of the press.
I see, but what about BBC? BBC is give the public out there, because I will go when I'm starving for something late at night, and all they have is MSNBC or CNN. I will go to BBC, and there's some reports that are good there. A bridge that is being built in Kenya, hunger in Nigeria, or whatever. They do have some stories that make you think that they are objective. But tell us the real story behind BBC for those who don't know.
You see, Americans are just suckers for all that English accent rubbish, because you were colonized by the British. That's what's really behind it, isn't it? I mean, obviously, I don't want to be a complete mutual admiration society. Obviously, this show is amazing, and it's amazing you have John Pilger on, who you said, as you said, was on our show a lot. Pilger described the BBC as the most refined propaganda organization or outlet in the world, something like that, because it's very smart. It's very smartly done. But if you actually monitored any BBC output of their international reporting, you'll see how subtle it is when it comes to, I don't know, a report from Venezuela or Cuba or Syria, or in the run up to the Iraq War, you'll see how clever it is that while seeming so magnanimous, here is this patrician network from London calling out to the world for freedom and human rights style values. The minute a director general of the BBC starts allowing stuff that NATO doesn't want out, or Washington or the intelligence services in the United States want, they're fired. And, I'm not being, this isn't a conspiracy. In my lifetime, two have gone. One was gone, who I worked under, Greg Dyke, a very famous director general here because he was in broadcasting, then went into football, actually. He was fired over the fact that David Kelly died in the run-up to the Iraq War and the coverage of it on the BBC, and he allowed anti-war voices. And previous to that is the father of actually Jeremy Corbyn's press officer, a guy called Alistair Milne. Seamus Milne worked for Jeremy Corbyn. Alistair Milne, his father, who's dead now, he was fired because a documentary was broadcast about a spy satellite, again, about intelligence. So when you listen to the BBC, realize that there are parameters under which they work, despite there being honorable exceptions and despite there being, some pretty good environmental nature programs and so on, pretty good comedies sometimes, although maybe less now. So when you're listening to BBC World Service and other outlets connected to the BBC, because I think you have BBC America there, realize that, they see it as it's censored. It is censored material.
Yeah, it seems like it hypnotizes you into watching it, but it's bait and switch. You'll see something that you like, and then you'll see something else that you like, and the next thing you know, it's some propaganda about Venezuela. Are they basically beating the war drums, in terms of Venezuela? From what, and if so, from who is pulling the strings there?
Oh, having spent most of my broadcast life arguably in the BBC, it was clear that Noam Chomsky's manufacturing consent works perfectly. When you get there in the newsroom, you look to who's being promoted, you see the kind of people being promoted are the kind of people that fall in line with the military industrial complex from, not even from London, from Washington. So that obviously the Iraq War was clear, the Afghanistan War. It was very interesting that we copied your Democrat leading mainstream cable channels when it came to Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan, so that the BBC would immediately be going, look how terrible this is. This withdrawal is appalling. You don't usually hear the BBC criticizing Joe Biden. Why is it that when he withdraws troops from the longest US war in history, we're suddenly getting all this criticism of Joe Biden over this chaotic withdrawal, which, all withdrawals are chaotic? Of course it was, because there were people presumably behind there in the context of the BBC reporting saying we should have a base there. I think they actually said it at different times. You have a base in Korea, South Korea. Why can't the United States have a base there for all time, like it has bases in so many other parts of the world, Philippines, wherever, for all time? It's not
Okinawa.
fair.
Okinawa, we have a base. I think we have 400 bases. If you read The Coming War on China, according to Pilger, he added it up there, including lily pad bases. There are 400 bases, surrounding China, and we're complaining about the China Seas. I remember Julian Assange telling me there's a reason why they're called the China Seas, because it's next to China. It's like he had this makeshift map made out of.
Well, you're not allowed to say that on the. That what you just said there, Randy, is completely off limits. If anyone were to start talking about, you imagine on MSNBC, if they started saying that, then that's dangerous.
Well, they don't say it at all. MSNBC, that bombshell report, and I want to talk about Julian on the next segment, but let's
the
go.
BBC. Well, if we're talking about that. Revelations or whatever, but some people say they were repeated. Only the BBC Somali service covered the fact that there could have been gun battles in central London to assassinate or kidnap.
That wasn't covered by BBC?
Somali service. They have all these foreign language services. No, zero coverage on the
Well, what did you
BBC.
make of that? I mean,
Zero.
some people were nitpicking. I had Isikoff on. I knew he was working on the story for a month, and I gave him some references and saw him in D.C. And kept my mouth shut the whole time until it came out.
That's because you're so mainstream, Randy. You and Isikoff probably in the bars of DC hanging out, talking about Russiagate.
No. All right. Now that was the thing. There were people saying, all right, if you look at the whole article, but the driving force of that piece by them was what you said. It's twofold. One was the spying, and the other was the attempted or the plan to either kidnap or to assassinate Assange. That's what rose to the top, not all of the ancillary stuff. And I think that you concurred with that in either an article or a tweet or on your show, Going Underground.
I did, absolutely. And anytime it gets on, it got onto CNN, which is, I mean, I know not many people watch CNN, in fairness, in the United States. And, did it get onto ABC News, onto the network?
No, it got on MSNBC the day of, right after I interviewed him in the morning. But
But if I give a bit of a free pass to the US media, obviously it concerns London in terms of national security, because what was thought about and even conceived was the idea of gun battles and the British authorities shooting people and shooting tires out at airports, maybe Heathrow Airport, using helicopters to down passenger planes. This was all happening in this country. So you'd expect the national broadcaster or the so-called independent television news outlets, which are of the mainstream, to cover it. Absolutely nothing.
What about political leaders? What about Boris Johnson or Stammer?
Absolutely. Well, Stammer is associated with the persecution of Assange, obviously. I mean, I would put a shout out to Aaron Mate's interview with Isikoff versus your one. I mean, yours was the first one. I think your one alerted the world, a certain world of people that watch this show or listen to your show about it. Aaron Mate exposed how quickly Isikoff got so angry about evidence that Mate was producing for Isikoff, when, of course, as journalists, we're supposed to be dispassionate, much as it's very difficult to be dispassionate about Assange because he's being tortured down the road here in London,
right?
According
Right.
to the
Look,
UN.
there are a lot of people that nitpicked about it, but I think that was in the last year, that story, and it comes from a mainstream media source, really was the most explosive story in terms of Assange that I've seen. And there were a lot of not mainstream, but alternative media outlets that wanted to nitpick around it rather than just focusing on the good part of it, which is what I did. I didn't let him talk about other things. I had him on for 35 minutes and kept the focus on the CIA, Pompeo, and these incidents that were planned. And I think that was the takeaway. And it has been. Everybody is talking about what the main point was that they were planning to kill or kidnap him.
And of course, that it could be used, and it can be used in court, hopefully, to free Julian Assange.
Yes, that's that. I don't want to say. I did speak to Isikoff about that the other day, and he was kind of wondering, wouldn't they use it in court? I mean, why would they at this point in time? Your opinion? Why would they want to go public, allow that to be out there? The Biden administration and the Department of Justice let that go out there again and be in their faces. And you know what I mean? If they continue, why don't they just drop the charges, in your opinion, when this story has come out? I know it happened before. It didn't happen when the FOIA thing and the CPS colluded with or instigated, created the problem with the Swedes, and then the stuff that came out with the spying with UC Global. I thought that would be the end of it. So now that didn't happen. Now you got this, and then the guy in Iceland retracting his testimony, and now this. Do you think
and arrested? Presumably, we don't know whether it's about lying. A lot of people talking in DC at the moment, and it's 30 unnamed officials in this Isikoff article. A lot of people talking. We know from the Bob Woodward book, full of inaccuracies. I'm audio booking it in between my Going Underground show and listening to it. And we've got the Stephanie Grisham, Melania's friend stuff. I mean, I suppose one could say that there would be people in the Biden administration who recognize that under the Obama administration, the decision was taken not to prosecute Julian Assange under the Espionage Act. And maybe this can be laid at the feet of Trump somehow, albeit the fact that obviously Obama, with Biden as vice president, prosecuted way more whistleblowers than all previous presidents combined. Is it because these 30 officials could somehow, was it I mean, you know, I'm always optimistic. I'm being accused of being optimistic all the time. Is this a prelude to them dropping the case of the grand jury and the extradition? We all hope so. So do presumably any journalist on planet Earth, because it doesn't matter if you're a US citizen. This indictment means as a journalist, you can be extradited and taken away for 175 years and put in a Virginia prison. Is it because of that? Because what other reason? I don't know, Randy, what you think.
I don't know.
Why else would 30 officials without names, albeit, be talking about how horrendous and how appalling the breach of human rights that was considered by the Trump CIA?
I think they don't want the spectacle, and I think this gives Biden the excuse or soft landing to get out of there and blame it all on Trump and Pompeo and say they violated the law just contemplating this. And so at this point in time, we're going to drop the charges. Is that a theory that you are entertaining?
You see, I mean, I think we share that. And yet when I talk to experts and, bigger people than I do, they're going, what are you talking about? You know, I mean, I can't name my sources, but they're really important people who say, you know, Julian Assange will never be forgiven for just illuminating these shadows of where the excuse for democracy really lives, and the fact that all our democracies in NATO nations are essentially fake. He can't be forgiven for that. It's such a crime. And then there are naive people like Edward Snowden, who's taken asylum in Putin's Russia, as it's called, in all media. He owns the whole country, apparently. Edward Snowden seems to appear to think, you know what, we'll be let off. I'll be let off and I'll be able to come and live my life normally in the United States because somehow the US will allow that again. Intelligence agencies have a long memory. I know you've been covering security issues, in comedy and in news for so many years.
They don't forget.
As I say, we're hopeful about Julian.
I know.
But, they're not going to accept Snowden, are they?
I don't think they're going to accept.
No way.
No. Listen, they've angered a lot of people, both of them within these institutions. A lot of them are secret. There's no oversight.
Albeit there's a difference there, of course, because Snowden was a whistleblower. Thank heavens he did what he did. Whereas Julian Assange is an award-winning journalist and publisher. That's different.
Yes, he is a publisher and he is a journalist, and he's a great writer, by the way. He used to pen some of the finest op-ed pieces that appeared in the Washington Post and other media outlets. And so he's not just a publisher, he is a journalist, and his brand of journalism may be unique to others, but as Stefano Marizzi said, what he did, he gave the whole world an eye to something that has been blinded by these security entities in DC and in London. And so
as you say, and he's such a conceptual thinker. In all the times I interviewed him when he was at the Ecuadorian embassy, I think before UC Global, the CIA cut out with spying on us. Right. I don't know. Hopefully we'll get the outtakes and stuff that we should have left in there. Who knows?
Wait a second. Did you interview him in 2017 or is 2016? When was the last time you interviewed him?
Was it twice or three times I interviewed him at the embassy? I can't remember. This was at a time when mainstream media outlets got their chance to interview him, and Julian would welcome them in to his tiny little, because again, we've got to remind people, when he was at this embassy, it's not a massive fancy embassy. It's like 2 rooms and a little, tiny dining room. And they were saying things like, if you're innocent of stuff, why don't you just walk out? And these same people are now being quoted as great authorities on security matters or anything. The absurdity of it, when everything that Julian Assange said would happen came to pass.
He did say that. absolutely said that, and we don't know if Obama's people were going to grab him. The CIA was, I mean, he was under intense scrutiny and surveillance back then, but not internally like it was in 2017. When you interviewed him last, do you know if it was in 2017? Because if you did, we could just go to the UC Global website and get an excerpt from that interview.
What is this cross-examination? I know the Guardian newspaper printed lies, not only about Manafort, Paul Manafort. Who is he? Who cares about who he is anymore? Trump's man went in there, complete lies about that. And they lied about me being apparently the Guardian said that I was some huge figure in the Robert Mueller FBI inquiry. I mean, the kind of garbage in Julian Assange's old allies who WikiLeaks chose to partner with, the New York Times, the Guardian, and so many other newspapers. Maybe they shouldn't have partnered with these so-called mainstream media outlets who, some suspect now for collusion in his entrapment. It's just absurd. I'm pretty sure the footage would be out there by now because we interviewed Jeffrey Robertson, Queen's Counsel, one of the greatest human rights barristers in this country. He came on our show quite a bit. He's there, talking legal arguments with his client, utter abuse by the CIA cutout of the client. What's the famous phrase? Client lawyer privilege. It is absolutely absurd. And yet, a British magistrate in this country can say the only reason he shouldn't be extradited to the US is because he might die in the United States, not because all these basic human rights were denied.
Well, that's it. I mean, she didn't even take into consideration the UC Global spying. She just brushed it off. And the CPS, going back to the CPS, manipulating the Swedish, not putting the iron fist on the Swedish
CPS under the Labour leader who stabbed Jeremy Corbyn in the back, figuratively, it has to be said, and destroying the left in this country, now embracing Blairism, the Adam Smith Institute, actually, the last I saw it, and embracing policies completely together with lockstep with the far right, some might say. He's a member of the Trilateral Commission, along with Henry Kissinger, Sir Keir Starmer, the man who was head of the CPS when we know emails were being sent to Sweden to say, get Assange for rape. They appear to say that anyway.
Well, we're going to talk about domestic politics in the UK when we come back. Just a few more questions about Assange. What do you foresee happening on the 27th and 28th?
It's hard for us to keep up to date with this. So for the people listening to this, with all its repercussions for journalism in your local hometown, at the national level, state level, international level, continental level, how we know that this case will mean that any journalist worth his salt will then be able to be imprisoned in supermax prisons and tortured according to the UN. And yet these court dates come and go, and he just sits there in jail, which is why, of course, some people said the Yahoo News story was academic, because they are assassinating him right now in jail. But we do have this court appointment in October. Will this, with all these new revelations, help him get bail even, so that at least he can't be imprisoned with the same person who made headlines here, who was a policeman who raped and killed a young woman, made headlines all over here? That's the kind of prison he's in with. He's in there with people accused of affiliating with Al-Qaeda and ISIS. At least he could get bail on October. What I'm hearing is he won't be given bail. Already I'm hearing that. And there's another case that maybe on Christmas Day or so around Christmas time. I mean, presumably they don't sit especially on Christmas Day, but maybe around Christmas Eve, who knows? Maybe that means that they're going to quietly get him out. Who knows?
Well, but you look at the Biden administration. If they drop the charges, then they're admitting that he didn't violate the Espionage Act provisions. And I don't even know how he could, since he's not even a U.S. citizen. He didn't give away, he wasn't ruining, anti-American propaganda. Like, that's what it was originally for. If you go back to World War I, guys like Eugene Debs, who was anti-war, Victor Berger, who was a journalist who was anti-war, and they were doing stuff that pissed off Wilson, so they put him in jail for 10 years. Berger got out early, but others, it was used as a repressive tool.
They didn't do Charlie Chaplin. They deported Charlie Chaplin. They didn't put Charlie Chaplin in prison under the Espionage Act for suspicions about him.
Right. Well, that's the deal here. If he does get out, then what about the 3 years that he already spent? Is that for bail jumping? That's how he first landed in this maximum security prison that houses the most dangerous, terrorists, robbers, murderers, whatever. He's in there with them for 3 years. And if they let him out, he's already served 3 years. And the only thing he's been convicted of is bail jumping.
And the bail jumping was under the Vienna Convention, seeking political asylum. In any case, there is a darker element to the Iskov story here, of course, because could they prosecution, which is the Department of Justice, not say, you see, this also revealed that there was a Russian plot. I don't think Iskov says directly, but definitely says the CIA suspected there was a plot to whisk him away to somewhere, completely denied, obviously, by WikiLeaks. We had WikiLeaks repeatedly say there was no way he was going to go to Moscow. WikiLeaks may have facilitated Edward Snowden's escape from US torture, but Julian Assange didn't want to go to Moscow. But they might use that article and then say, you see, he's a escape risk, he's a bail risk, therefore still keep him in this Supermax prison. I don't even know why a Supermax prison, what they think of, I mean, it just shows what they think of a gentle intellectual character like Julian Assange, that they can treat him in a way that's this bad. And don't forget, COVID was spreading through that jail during the COVID lockdowns. People were dying in that jail of COVID.
Right. Well, the conditions are bad. Let's look back, 12, 13, 14 years ago, 15 years ago, when Maggie Thatcher was prime minister, and there was a EAW for Augusto Pinochet, who was responsible for 10,000, 20,000 disappearances or outright murders. And tell us about the conditions that he lived under pending that extradition request by the Spanish.
Funnily enough, around that time, just before he was sent to a massive country home where he received visiting dignitaries like Mrs. Thatcher herself, I think I went to a tailor's shop. I think I was wearing a badge saying indict Pinochet or something. And the tailor went, he just came in here. So, I'm to blame. I should have apprehended him there and then. Very clear how, again, one of Tony Blair's home secretaries allowed that butcher to leave this country and not be extradited for obviously crimes that are so heinous. Anyone who knows about the United States and British destruction of Salvador Allende's party and leading to his death in 9/11, 1973, the first 9/11. Pinochet was here and Blair's people got him out in effect. And obviously, as you regards British politics, Pinochet was a trailblazer of the Chicago economics school of privatization, not privatizing copper, whereby Chile got most of its GDP from, which has enabled people to go, look what a success story it is in terms of privatization. In fact, it wasn't. It was the copper prices. That's another story. But certainly we know why Mrs. Thatcher was such a fan of Pinochet, because like so many NATO governments, privatization of resources. You still have Amtrak. We have a railway system here that is bizarre. But Thatcher would privatize the post office, the railways, the water, the electricity, the phone companies, the airports, the airline, everything. Obviously inspired by Pinochet.
Okay, you know what? This will be, instead of playing music here, let's play a clip of this interview with Julian Assange. That one of your 3 interviews with Julian Assange, and I don't know if this was from 2017, which is going to surprise you, but it's not. It doesn't matter which date. It's the watching you two together in that room. He's such a dangerous guy. All right, folks. Here's Afshin Rattansi going underground interviewing Julian Assange. This was your last interview.
Rather different.
At that time, before Snowden, before other elements from WikiLeaks, we didn't really know that the Don't Be Evil company was so entwined with elements of the US security state. And I know in this transcript, which makes up this book, it's a point you want to make. Eric Schmidt, his father worked in the Nixon administration, and he'd just written a book called Empire of the Mind. And that got endorsements as well from Tony Blair and Henry Kissinger.
They got endorsements from Tony Blair, Henry Kissinger, Madeleine Albright, a cast of warmongers or actual war criminals, pre-publication, all set up pre-publication. And Henry Kissinger is in fact one of the central people in that book. But, you know, it's fine for people to write books. The question to me became, why was that book written? It's a very, very strange book.
And you actually met Jared Cohen. He was one of the people that came to meet you. And this is a man, and we must say that this interview is being conducted just days after the US Congress has authorized military aid to so-called moderate Islamists in Syria. There are airstrikes in Iraq. Tell me about this Jared Cohen.
So Jared Cohen was the previous advisor for Hillary. He jumped from Hillary to work to being the head of Google Ideas. And Google Ideas is an in-house State Department that Google runs. Its functions are essentially the same as the US State Department, to make alliances with various people, to bring together activists and security generals and so on, bring them together under Google Ambit and create various forms of networking, and even in some cases actively intervene with different governments to try and destabilize them. Yeah, the position being pushed forward by Google at its most senior executive level to Washington is that it is the state who should determine what is published and what is not published. There should be a state body that oversees whistleblowing organizations, and they have to go through that state body before they can release material.
Okay, that was from a few years back, I think 2017. By the way, I'm Randy Credico, live on the fly here on the Progressive Radio Network. Also, this show can be seen on Assange Countdown to Freedom.com and Ropefin, YouTube, and we want to get this out as much as possible. We're talking to Afshin Rattansi, who is the host, and he sits in doesn't edit, but he sits in and watches because you are totally engaged. In fact, do you ever sleep? I mean, I know you watch these movies at night and you got to get up. Like last night I spoke to you at 4 hours. When do you have time to sleep? Because I know you're busy.
It's terrible, isn't it? No, it's such a privilege to be able to do this job. And, you know, we want more people doing it clearly who think to question more. As is the motto of RT, of course, and question everything. That's so important. But of course, because of the time zones, and because, as we know, and in a sense, Julian Assange showed us that how interlinked and how international the security apparatus of the world is, the sun never sets on the lies, the disinformation, the propaganda given by the powerful to destroy the lives of ordinary people all around the world. So yeah, it's full time, isn't it? As you know, Randy, since you have, you know, amazing guests all the time and you ask them questions about very varied things, it kind of comes back again to, which is why the title of your show is this, presumably, in terms of Countdown to Assange's Freedom. Assange showed us how interlinked everything is and how international it is, and therefore how many time zones there are.
Well, Phil, thank you. The guests that you have on, and you always have the most amazing guests on, and you got to do 3 shows a week. So what's the process of how do you get these guests? Who decides, and what goes into it?
Obviously, the Kremlin decides everything. You know? We just asked.
No, I'm saying.
You know, the equivalent of MI6 in Russia is called SVR. I hope that's not a secret. No, they're not coming for me right now. No, obviously we have nothing from them at all. They never tell us anything. Not that one should be sanguine about that. Chomsky famously talked to the BBC's top presenter, and the top presenter said, "No one's telling me what to say." And Chomsky went, "You know what? You'd know if what you were saying wasn't what they wanted you to say, because you wouldn't be sitting in that chair asking me questions." Something going underground does in questioning NATO propaganda clearly is liked by the politicians in Russia that mandate the funding of RT. I recognize that very, very obviously about that. However, that means that no one is telling me what to say. It's just the thoughts of myself and this young team that are questioning more, that are continually questioning. We do try and cover the whole gamut of science, art, politics, and so on, because of course all these are interlinked in a way to the idea of human liberty and freedom. And I suppose that's very much what the young team that we work with believe in. That's an abiding thing. But you know, they're amazing. They're always thinking of these different guests from all around the world. Of course, when you make a program like this, you're sometimes disappointed in the numbers, the ratings, because you're thinking, hang on a minute, that story, I don't know what you do, whether you've had anything on Somalia. A lot of people were saying the withdrawal from Afghanistan presaged a NATO involvement, drone strikes perhaps in Somalia. Why are people not more interested in Africa, say, or Southeast Asia? So, you know, we try not to lean on the ratings too much. We try sometimes to go, look, we'll just give this to the audience. We don't care, but this is part of the continuing so-called McCarthyite Cold War stuff that started when? Under under Hoover, under Dulles?
Started under George Washington. But, you know, I must say, because I love this show, that, and I know you love it, if you had right now a choice to do anything to do in life, this is what you would choose, hosting this show, I believe. Am I correct?
That is a depressing thing to say, isn't it?
No,
Yeah,
but
one's lucky. One's lucky to do that. Yeah, of course. And you know, it is that freedom that you're given, as I say, a freedom with that unconscious Chomskyan idea in the background, that we can do what we want. I mean, there are technical limits sometimes, and when we want to talk to people in regimes that are sanctioned by the United States and by NATO, there are problems sometimes we find. When we went to interview Assad in Syria, while Britain and the United States were de facto arming ISIS and Al-Qaeda linked groups against Assad, there were problems sometimes, but you know, we rarely go out unless they're heads of state. And of course,
people say that's hyperbole, but it's absolutely true. What you just said about Al-Qaeda and ISIS. You know, people think, well, that's just hyperbole. It's not.
It does sound like hyperbole. If you were to meet people, you know, in a bar and say, you do realize that Obama was funding ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Funnily enough, actually, on the far right in your political spectrum, they'd say, well, obviously he is. He's a member of Al-Qaeda. He's Kenyan anyway. He's not American. No, that's not what we're saying. We're saying actually there are, they were using proxies just as they did to create what would become the Taliban and ISIS and Al-Qaeda when they funded the Mujahideen, of course, against the Soviet Union in the 80s.
Well, you know, the more resistance you get, the more difficult it is for you to get access, you know, through the internet or whatever, must mean it's a higher priority for Washington and London, not for you to interview these people and give a different side. Give me an example, like, let's say Venezuela. Is it difficult to actually get interviews out of Venezuela and get an objective outlook from somebody in government there?
I mean, luckily we are tending to get them, but then there are sanctions involved. What if we were to book a TV studio in Caracas or Tehran or any of Washington, London, and Brussels' enemies? What are we doing? Are we breaking sanctions legislation by paying money to a studio? We're under attack. I've been personally attacked. My bank details. My bank said it was the security services. I mean, it sounds a bit mad. But then, of course, as you implied there, it kind of feels good that you're that important that they would think of doing that. And RT does go out weekly reach of 700 million around the world. And I've been around the world where, you know, a kebab salesman in Phuket or someone will going underground, which is a great feeling. And you do have a great feeling when they clamp down on you as well. Not the way they clamped down on Julian Assange, obviously. That's too far. None of us want to be tortured and assassinated, like the attempts on his life. But there is a joy in that. And once the CIA actually got back to us, if anyone watches Going Underground on YouTube, underground_RT, you'll see each show ends with a massive load of attempts to contact people we are making allegations against. And the Going Underground team spent ages sending those allegations out, whether it be to Saudi Arabia, whether it be to Israel, whether it be to Goldman Sachs. And of course, the CIA comes up again and again, and we got a reply once. I think we had a young producer who said, this is weird. The CIA, they replied from Langley. And it was just this diatribe of insults against my show going underground, or the show of the team. And I said, no, that's great. Because they were feeling a bit down. You know, they were a bit young. We were going, that's great. They hate our show.
Well, you know what they love? They love Wolf Blitzer. They love Jake Tapper. I don't think they ever encounter the kind of roadblocks and headaches that you encounter over there in, and the production team at Going Underground, or MSNBC, where Ari Melber, and a guy who used to work, actually was worked at Al Jazeera, a fellow by the name of Ali Velshi. They seem to never talk about the issues that you talk about. I mean,
he was a colleague of my little brother, who is a U.S. correspondent in Washington for Al Jazeera. I suppose, I'm not casting any aspersions. You get paid money and you stop talking about certain things. I know that's very common there in the alt-left world over there. Literally, from Going Underground's perspective, the more anti-Russian the guest, the better, because we can argue it out. We can talk about the propaganda. We can talk about perceptions. We can argue it out. We're not going to just avoid the topic, just as you mentioned, these journalists are avoiding the topic. We'll attack anyone if necessary.
That's journalists in quotes. So obviously they have very luxurious frills going with their gig, and they don't want to give that up. It's such a corrupting factor. And then they have big homes, and then they have children they want to put in college. And if they were to take an honest track, if there's an honest bone in their body, they would probably lose all of that. I mean, they would.
Exactly. And so the fact that $710 billion is being signed away, that's just one part of it by Biden to the military industrial complex. Who cares if 40 million Americans can't eat tonight without the SNAP food stamp program? Are you saying that's what they're thinking? Are you saying that's what they're thinking?
Yeah, that's the information we get on your show. And what about the UK? I mean, you've been very critical of the policies, the neoliberal policies of the present, the House of Commons and Boris Johnson. They're cutting and cutting and cutting social programs and making room for big projects like the submarines that are going to be made in Australia.
We can only dream of your stimulus debate and some kind of checks going out. Although I think in the Woodward book, it said something about Trump wanted way bigger checks, but that's a separate thing. Boris Johnson's dad used to come quite regularly on our show, doesn't come on anymore. I think he's not allowed to come on now. His son has become prime minister, but Boris Johnson has cut a £20 payment to 6 million of the poorest people in this country, which people say will lead to immediately 800,000 people, more or less immediately going into poverty. This while the COVID crisis has enriched his party's business friends, business partners, levels of corruption that are alleged every day, even in the mainstream press, to give them credit. And it's interesting because Britain, people are comparing Johnson to Trump in a way. China, the United States, both countries, very different systems, both very much putting inequality at the top. You saw that point about Biden saying, I'm a capitalist, but having to say that to reassure people in the US as he argued for Keynesian spending of a kind. And let's not forget, since Bernie Sanders, the kind of talk in civil society in your country, the idea that you can have people talking about socialism, let alone, okay, it'll be a while before communism, although they talk about communism a lot on Fox News. The fact that people can talk about socialism in your country, can you remember that, Randy, when it was on TV all the time?
I have to do
Congress people.
I have to do my impression of Bernie Sanders if I'm going to talk about socialism on this show. Now, let me ask you a question. If I, Bernie Sanders, was in London, what party would I be in? What would I be representing? The Labour Party or the SNP?
Let me think. Well, what did you vote on the Iron Dome and helping Israel's system, defense system, while people were going hungry in the streets of probably Vermont even? Which way did you vote on that?
Well,
Why
everybody
aren't you
goes the same
talking
way
more
when it comes to-
volubly? Why aren't you talking more about Venezuela? Maybe you're just being the same. We only have one party, as they say here, like you only have one party. I'm sorry, Bernie. Great words and some great talks at speech points, but ultimately you're probably in the same old rigmarole, because I haven't heard you go on and on about Julian Assange. I haven't heard you go on and on about talking about Venezuela, so on.
Iran
Obviously,
or
Iran.
China. Or,
Well, in fairness, in Iran, he did talk about the Mossadegh coup on a big primetime platform at a presidential debate. Got to give him that. And he does talk about Israeli atrocities. But when it comes to the voting, and what was it? Was he offered labor secretary and he took the committee role instead of being labor secretary? What's all that about? Why not?
I have no idea, because they could have fired him after one day and he would have lost his seat, possibly. But
And he could have become a martyr then. That's a good thing.
I didn't hear anybody in your parliament talking negatively about that warship that was in was it the Caspian Sea? Is that it?
Yeah, there was actually, just a few minutes ago, I was, just innocently, there's a thing called Vessel Tracker online where you can see where the vessels are. Your country is sending a massive strike group to the South China Sea, to China's maritime borders, saying it's nothing about threatening them, even though it's only been revealed in the past few days, that the US has personnel on Taiwan, which Beijing considers part of China. So you're sending a massive strike carrier force. Britain is sending the HMS Elizabeth, which I don't think we had enough warplanes to put on board. So we're putting your F-35s. F-35s are the kind that killed those 67 children that, in fairness to the New York Times, they put on their front page when they were killed by Israeli forces in May. Why are the United States and Britain sending all these warships to China?
I don't know.
What is that about?
All you have to do is watch the coming war on China, and you'll find out.
This is worse than John Pilger's film, The Coming War on China, because now they're in motion. They're going up there. And
they already have 400 bases there. Is this going to intimidate the Chinese government?
Well, someone said on our show, former MI6 officer, that meeting in Alaska between China and, was it Blinken who was there?
Yeah.
Who was it? Or was it
Blanco? I think it was Blanco. I call him Blanco.
Blanco. And he thought he could lecture China about human rights. And people can look up our coverage of the so-called Uyghur genocide, which there's a unofficial kind of court action going on here, where the evidence is quite bizarre and blatantly propagandistic. That Alaska meeting was a turning point in world history, some said it was, because when Blinken was accusing China of human rights abuses, thinking that Beijing was just going to roll over, all they could talk about was Black Lives Matter and the brutality of US authorities on people of color in your country, let alone Guantanamo Bay, which is still open.
I didn't see that. I must have missed that episode on going underground, but it's
look out
certainly.
for it. It's Alistair Crook, a former MI6 agent, who talked about it. He said, this is not the way we expect China, and presumably your US diplomats in the State Department expect China to behave. I don't know whether they think they're still, backing the nationalists. I know China had National Day, 72 years the other day. Do they think that Chiang Kai-shek is coming back? Have they not realized that China's done quite well out of Mao and beyond?
What are they afraid of? What is the motivation? Is it because they don't have troops anywhere? In fact, I was in Argentina 10 years ago. They were building a railroad going from the south to Buenos Aires because they don't have any a real railway system in Buenos Aires, and they help with that. They're building a dam in Kenya. It seems like they're building bridges and railroads while we are bombing bridges and railroads, the US and the UK.
So I don't, what's the fear here? Is that
Well, the
because,
propaganda, even from the financial press, is now being used, and some people have illuminated the propaganda that they're saying, you see, China is seeking strategic access to these resources in terms of geopolitical power. No, what they're doing is building these things, getting them, building trade partnerships, building things on trade, not on attacking those countries, not putting them into debt, as some people have been saying. There have been some work on this. I don't know whether you can do an imitation of Gore Vidal to explain this,
no,
but I mean, you know, this, we're talking about the fall of empires, and of course, as the United States is a declining imperium, it's clear that the last gasps of the Pentagon, with all that money, all those ships, all those nuclear warheads, there's nothing they can really do. What can they do except threaten China in this way
what do
and
they want
hope?
China to do then? Tell me, what
Well,
is it that,
why couldn't China just roll over like the Soviet Union and have Yeltsin say, okay, I'll privatize everything and allow venture capital funds to come in and buy all our stuff, and it won't be controlled by a democratically accountable state? And why can't Xi Jinping just do that? I mean, probably these conversations are going on in the State Department right now and in Langley, and of course your Brookings institutions and all manner of weird think tanks you have over there in DC going, why can't they do what Yeltsin did, and in a way Gorbachev as well, and just roll over so that we can get our investment funds controlling the assets of the companies in the manufacturing capacity and the service sector of China, instead of keeping it under control of the Chinese Communist Party.
wow, it's just amazing. Yes, and by the way, there were 300 insurance companies that popped up in the old Soviet Union once Yeltsin got in. I can imagine all these insurance companies like Geico would love to do that in China. There's a lot of money to be made if they privatize.
Massive amount of money, and that the stolen Russian money has ended up bankrolling politicians here. That's the allegation, of course, from those Pandora paper things. Russian, I mean, for some reason, the way they're being presented by the International Consortium on Investigative Journalists says this is Putin controlling the, no, this is Putin and his people and the parties, actually all parties in Russia, want oligarchs to return the money that was stolen in the privatization processes, where the life expectancy of Russians went down because of neoliberal reforms, resulting, if you extrapolate it, in the deaths of millions and millions of people, let alone the billions sloshing around on the French Riviera and I don't know, maybe on your Florida coast, maybe your Hamptons. A lot of Russian money there too, is it?
Well, we've been talking to Afshin Rattansi, always informative and entertaining. I like that. All right. That's why I like you on the show all the time, as is John Pilger, as is Craig Murray, informative, engaging, and entertaining at the same time. Watch Going Underground, folks. Just go to RT, go to the website, go to YouTube, and get, if you haven't seen, there's a library of 900. It's a library of Alexandria. Going Underground. Thank you, and kudos to your staff and the producers and the editors for putting out the best product that people can see on television. Afshin Rattansi, we have so much to talk about. We'll have you back on soon.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go out now. I haven't decided what it is, but we're going to go out with some music, and we'll see you next Monday at the same time.
There's a man who leads a life of danger. To everyone he meets, he stays a stranger. With every move he makes, another chance he takes, odds are he won't live to see tomorrow. Secret agent man, secret agent man, they've given you a number and taken away your name. Beware of pretty faces that you find. A pretty face can hide an evil mind.